Mondo cool. That's right, boys. Mondo cool.
Fallout series was one originally headed by Black Isle Studio. Fallout 3 was Bethesda's crack at the cult classic series. Fallout 3 is an FPS RPG using the ideas and concepts of the Fallout series with the game engine of Elder Scrolls Oblivion. The graphics in Fallout 3 are pretty rough, to say the least. This is not a pretty game by any means. The graphics, even for when it came out, were fairly outdated and just looks ugly. Fortunately, despite this, the game's art direction and setting really make up for this. Post-apocalyptic settings are few and far between, and this game really does bring that setting to life. Everything feels dead and empty, but in a good way, because that's how it's supposed to feel. Everything's deserted and dirty and in ruins, and most of the time if you see anything that moves, chances are it's just something horribly mutated and it's trying to kill you. The setting is great, and the ugly graphics do little to take away from this, as the game is just simply immersive. The music in this game is easily one of the highlights. Your character has something called a Pip-Boy, which is a device that not only acts as your menu, but also allows you to use the radio. There's mainly only one station that is really worthy of listening to, which is Galaxy News Radio. However, I would have liked a few more stations. The only other one is Agatha's station. You'd have to do a quest to unlock that one. The music in this game has an old-time 50s feel to it, which is really unique, and it serves to make the game more interesting. There's just something alluring about slaughtering disgusting mutants and bugs to the tune of swing music. Along with the music, this channel also has an MC named Three Dog, who basically chronicles your adventures in the wasteland. It's actually pretty cool to hear about your exploits through Three Dog, especially since the voice actor does a good job of bringing his character to life. Speaking of which, the voice work in this game is actually pretty top-notch. Special mention goes to Liam Neeson, who plays as your father in the game. Sound-wise, this game is perfect as it is. It really helps create the game's atmosphere, which is easily one of the game's strengths. Now, the story in this game is one of my chief complaints toward it. It's just not interesting. The main story is basically that as a child, you grew up in Vault 101. However, one day, your dad decides to leave the vault without telling you why. So you go off looking for him, and then you come to find out that all he wanted to do was continue his research on something called Project Purity, which makes clean water for the wasteland since it's all radiated. Some stuff happens after that, but honestly, it's mostly uninteresting. Now, the majority of the game actually has you doing side quests, and those are actually more interesting than the main quest, which is pretty sad. Particularly if you decide to get the Game of the Year edition, or buy some DLC, those especially are much more interesting. However, the main story leaves something to be desired. One more thing, the game adds a morality system, which I felt added very little to the game. All it really affects is what trophies and achievements you get, and what messages you hear on the radio. Playing the game evil also makes the game a lot easier though, since you can just kill people instead of buying things. But in terms of story, it doesn't really affect much. As mentioned before, Fallout 3 is an FPS RPG that uses the same engine as Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and in my opinion is a much better game, but also suffers from some of the same issues. But at the same time, it also fixes some other ones. First of all, the level scaling has been fixed. In Oblivion, everything in the game was on the exact same level as your main character, which is stupid, as it defeats the purpose of leveling up in the first place. However, in Fallout 3, this is fixed by making enemies all on a set level. However, one of the issues of the engine that comes back are the clunky controls. Well, it does work well for the most part, especially if you're using melee weapons, but the game emphasizes guns, and unfortunately the shooter controls are not perfect. They're still functional and work somewhat well, but the controls are not as smooth as your typical FPS. However, what makes up for the clunky control mechanics is the VAT system. Regardless of what weapon you're using, it can be a sword, grenade, machine gun, or a rocket launcher, you can use the VAT system to lay waste to your foes. The way it works is that you have an AP meter on the lower right corner of the screen. Depending on what you use and how many times you use it, you can use the VAT system to attack enemies, which uses up AP. AP regenerates regenerates on its own over time, or you can use an item to replenish it quicker. That lets you pick different body parts to attack enemies. Most of the time headshots are best, but sometimes it's better to pick other body parts depending on the context of the situation. That's just a great system and rarely gets old. Seeing enemies die in a gorish explosion of blood and body parts is incredibly satisfying. Another important thing about VATS is that you take 0 damage while you're doing it, so you can really use it to your advantage if you get your timing just right. Now, aside from the combat, the best part about this game is the leveling up system. My only real complaint towards it is the low level cap of 20. Luckily, if you buy the Game of the Year edition, or if you buy the Broken Steel DLC, the game's level cap is extended to 30, and it really makes a big difference and definitely lengthens a playthrough for this game. Every time you level up, you're given skill points, which you can use to distribute to a number of skills, from lockpicking, sneaking, explosives, energy weapons, and tons more. After distributing your skill points, you will then be able to choose a perk. These perks are very handy, and they range from taking less overall damage to being able to carry more stuff and being able to level up faster. The leveling up in this game feels really rewarding, and it gives a good sense of progression. However, with all this praise comes quite possibly the biggest issue with this game: the glitches. Even after this game received a number of patches, all 3 versions of this game experienced some really horrendous glitches. The PC version suffers the least, but the PS3 version suffers the most. And, lucky me, I'm playing the PS3 version. Now, the glitches can be pretty bad, but I was still able to finish the game 3 times. So, all in all, they're more of a nuisance rather than game breaking, but they do hinder the experience to a noticeable degree. Another negative to mention would be the long load times. They're pretty bad. Fallout 3 is a great game. It has a wonderful soundtrack, great atmosphere, fun gameplay, and compelling level mechanics. However, unfortunately, the game is hindered by its weak main story, but most importantly, its terrible glitches. If you can look past those, however, it's definitely a game worth picking up, particularly if you get the Game of the Year edition for its extra content and higher level cap. This has been Shintai, folks. Take it easy.